In the Middle East, there are three main geopolitical blocs. First, there's the Iranian-led so-called Axis of Resistance, consisting of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Second, there is a Saudi Emirati-led bloc, consisting of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, and Israel is tacitly allied with this bloc. Lastly, there is a Turkish-Qatari axis, which is consisting of Ankara, Doha, Libya's internationally recognized government in Tripoli. Ever since the blockade of Qatar began in mid-2017, it's become increasingly difficult to ignore the tension between the Qatari-Turkish axis on one side and the Saudi Emirati-Egyptian bloc on the other. This tension, some call it a quote-unquote Cold War between Ankara on one side and the Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Cairo axis on the other, is of course playing out in other parts of the Arab world too, such as Sudan, Tunisia, Palestine, Qatar, Yemen, so on and so forth.
The Arab revolutions have drawn a clear line between three major power blocs in the region: the anti-revolutionary bloc, the Shiite Crescent, and the pro-revolutionary bloc. These blocs, in my opinion, have contrasting agendas, priorities, and goals that are impossible to reconcile. The balance of power between these blocs and the support or lack of support for each of them from the grassroots and foreign powers might shape to a large extent the future of the region.
What we see in the Middle East occurring is a major shift and a major divide that divides pretty much all the conflicts that we see occurring in the Middle East region today. Much of this is our alliances and blocs that emerge based not just on joint geopolitical interests, but most importantly based on joint values and ideational synergies. And on the one hand, we see Qatar and Turkey, those who supported the Arab Spring, supported the revolution, supported the people. On the other hand, we have the bloc of the United Arab Emirates, supported by Saudi Arabia and Egypt, who oppose political Islam, who oppose civil society, who oppose the developments of the Arab Spring and are trying to lead a counter-revolutionary alliance. And these two blocs are clashing at the moment in Libya, they're clashing in the Eastern Mediterranean, they are starting to clash in Syria. We see some of it, first initial attempts of these clashes appearing in Yemen, and other parts obviously in the Gulf, where the Gulf crisis has put Qatar on one side and Saudi Arabia and the UAE on the other side.
One of the interesting and fascinating aspects of the so-called return of the Russians to the Middle East has to do with Russia's ability to balance and counterbalance different geopolitical blocs within the region. Russia is friendly with many governments on different sides of various geopolitical fault lines. It is rather amazing that Russia has a good relationship with Iran, Israel, Syria, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. Russia is also on very good terms with virtually all of the governments in North Africa, including Egypt, which I would argue is especially close to Moscow. Russia sees its power in the region as being very connected to its ability to maintain this balance. At the same time, when we look at Chinese foreign policy in the Middle East, we see similar thinking. In many ways, Beijing's approach to regional crises is certain ways similar to Moscow's, mainly in the sense that China does not take sides in many of these tensions, such as those which pit Doha and Abu Dhabi against each other, or which pit Israel against members of the Iranian-led bloc, or the so-called Axis of Resistance.
Russia doesn't have the capacity to fill the vacuum left by the US. However, Russia has the capacity to utilize the differences among the regional blocs and between these blocs and the United States. The question is, for how long Russia can maintain such an equation while the struggle between the conflicting parties in the Middle East intensifies? Russia has been employing its increasing influence in the Middle East as a card against the US and the Europeans in its global power play. The Middle East is not a priority for China compared to its immediate neighborhood, the Asia-Pacific region, or even Central Asia. Yet it is very crucial when it comes to China's energy security and its Belt and Road Initiative. For a long period of time, China has been adopting non-interference policy, focusing only on the economic dimension and its relation with the countries of the Middle East. In the Gulf, China has obviously chosen United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia as top economic partners. However, balancing with Iran is always at the center of the Chinese policies in the Gulf. Despite its strategic relations with Turkey and Ankara's Middle Corridor initiative, the Uyghur factor will always cast doubts and shadows on the bilateral relations. I think that China's relation with Israel will come under big pressure in the coming period as United States is forcing its allies to choose between Washington and Beijing.
The United States, which itself obviously has an ideology-based, value-based foreign policy, usually backs parties and players in the Middle East based on mutual values as well as mutual interests. They dislike the idea of more revolutions and more civil societal discourse. It's more of a relationship that is based on personal interlinkages between leaders in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Sisi in Egypt, and the US president. China and Russia, for one, they are pursuing a more unconditional foreign policy, and they will reach out to whoever is most beneficial in a pragmatic way on any given day. And we've seen so far Russia has built very, very solid relationship with the UAE, but also very good relationship with Qatar and Turkey. Although in Libya, Turkey and Russia might be clashing, the Russians are more pragmatic in the selection of their partners. And the same is definitely true for China as well. China in the last couple of years has also been very pragmatic, pursuing their interests based on whoever fulfills these interests at any given time. And hence why I think the Chinese will not have to choose between one bloc or the other. They're actually building relationships with both sides.
As a Middle East analyst, when I look at the region, what I am seeing is a new geopolitical order being created. This is being created within the context of the world becoming much more multipolar. The United States remains a very powerful actor in the Middle East. However, it is also a power in relative decline. This is giving opportunities to actors in the region who are trying to shape new realities. The tension between Turkey and the United Arab Emirates is going to be incredibly important to keep an eye on. We are seeing friction between Ankara and Abu Dhabi playing out in many hotspots of the Arab world. Libya, Sudan, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, so on and so forth. It's also increasingly clear to me that tensions in the Gulf region are regionalizing and internationalizing very quickly and in some very significant ways. The tensions between the Ankara-Doha axis and the Riyadh-Abu Dhabi axis are playing out beyond the Gulf and beyond the Middle East. We see these competitions for geopolitical influence playing out in the Balkans, in the Horn of Africa, in Central Asia, also in West Asia.
The US decline and its withdrawal from the region will intensify, in my opinion, the regional competition and rivalry, and will eventually invite more outside players. It will also push regional powers to depend more on their hard power to secure their interests, and this means more economic resources will be allocated to defense and security measures at the expense of the basic needs of the people in the Middle East. In such environment, small and neutral countries will be the most vulnerable. as they feel threatened, they will start looking for security guarantors and economic supporters. Without a fundamental change, in my opinion, in the behavior of some regional countries, we might unfortunately end up in a worse situation than the one we are already in the region.
Now, looking forward to where this is going into the future, we think and we have to expect that the divide that exists between these blocs, because it's ideational, because it's based on ideology, is a lot less reconcilable, right? These are clashes over narratives, over ideologies that are not very easy to discuss. So you can't sit down on the negotiation table to discuss whether this strategy or that grand strategic narrative is better than the other grand strategic narrative. And that's part of the problem here. So this is not a short-term, these are not short-term alliances and blocs. These are long-term blocs that will divide the MENA region for many, many years and probably decades to come, and will make it ever more difficult for external parties, the main players outside, to intervene and interfere, to mediate, and to find solutions which are constructive. Because having these people sit together and discuss issues of mutual interests that do exist, for example, when we look at the Eastern Mediterranean, becomes increasingly difficult because of ideational differences. That is particularly true between Turkey and Egypt. It's definitely true between Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. But it's also definitely true for the divide that we've seen in the Gulf between Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, where both sides don't really think that they can see past their ideational differences, and hence why this is now already the fourth year of the Gulf crisis ongoing.